Thank you. It's great to do this session, and I'm sorry I couldn't hear the announcement. It was a silent session, so I wasn't sure I was announced. But cutting on to the topic that we have for the discussion, so we're going to talk about, for the next half an hour, we're going to talk about the impact that AI is going to have on the culture of organizations in the coming times, right? Now this is something, now AI has come at us at a lot of speed over the last couple of years, and we have seen the impact rolling out. I mean, there's a lot of chat GPTs that we have been using, which is literally search on steroids that we've been doing. But we all know, and a lot of sessions earlier in the day that we've talked about the impact of how technology advancements are happening. There's a lot of compute power that's being used. But what does that mean to the average office worker, right? And that is what we're going to delve about. I'm going to speak about this topic for a few minutes, and then I'm going to invite Madhu, my friend, who's going to come and talk to us about some other questions that we are going to have a chat about, right? Now, what is going to create that change? Now, whenever technological advancements happen, we know that change happens, and people, being people, there are emotions involved. People react to it either positively by embracing that change, or they react to it negatively by resisting that change. AI is no different, right? In the whole realm that we're working on, AI is going to create those moments of truth that we're going to come against. So broadly, there are three forces that we're facing here, right? And I'm going to talk about them. One, AI is making us a lot more productive and a lot more efficient. So what does this mean for the workforce? As far as the blue-collar workers are concerned, there is impact, but it's more in the field of robotization. But for the white-collar workers, which represents the vast majority of people in this room, the impact is a lot more definite. We know that secretarial jobs initially, a lot of number crunching jobs, a lot of the roles which are around finance in the initial stages, and those roles are definitely going to be impacted. In general, artificial intelligence has meant that we are able to do our things a lot faster, a lot better, and a lot cheaper, right? A lot less expensive. And in that realm, the whole human context is going to play around. We are seeing just in the world of developer productivity, which is a holy grail. If you look at Copilot on GitHub, roughly by the start of this year, late 23, one would say that 34% of all the prompts have been accepted by whoever is the developer who's working on it, which means there is this great amount of productivity that is just being used right up front, right? And I think that just slows things down. That just fastens things up, sorry. The other big impact that we're seeing is that if you look at 1986, it took about, if you look at the inflation adjusted S&P 500 index, you would require about 7.8 people to make $1 million in revenue. Today it's about 5.1. With chat GPT, with generative AI, it's going to be probably around 2 to 3 people, right? Which means we're going to need fewer people, and that is going to create cultural impact, because people are going to be very anxious about how they're going to be impacted. The second thing that's at work here is the concept of intellect as a service. Now, we are used to talking about IaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, but increasingly the world is going to move towards intellect or intelligence as a service, right? And that is something that AI is going to enable. And this is again going to lead to a lot of problems, because human beings who are typically told, a lot of us who are brought up saying that we bring in the intellectual angle to the roles that we perform, we will now have to come to terms with what this intellect means. I'll give you some examples, right? I mean, if you look at what AI, Gen AI specifically, in the last few years has been enabled, it's enabled us to automate, augment, and change. Automate like Cursor and Runway, augment like, for instance, using, Copilot. It augments, right? Copilot and using character.ai in that spaces and so on. And also a lot of things which are revolved around just changing things, which is where the OpenAI GPTs work. Even if you want to make a business presentation today, you don't have to really do it yourself. A lot of content writing has become a lot easier. You just need to go to beautiful.ai. You can make your own presentation. You can go to pop.ai. It'll do it for you. You want to write a business plan? You can have 15-minute plan.ai, you can go to wordcraft.ai. There's a lot of options out there that make these things easy and enabled, right? This means, and another interesting stat is just on GitHub alone, about 50% of the most popular repos are on Gen AI, and this has happened in the last 2 years. Hugging Face had 5K models in 21. Now Hugging Face has 340K models just in the AI space. So the sheer rampant increase in numbers in the space is going to imply that people are going to be very impacted by what the future is going to hold for them, right? So that means there is going to be anxiety. And I think the third and most important force is the sheer pace of change. Human beings, all through our evolution, right from the 1500s to now, we have gone through multiple stages of evolution that have hit us, right? Technological advancement, electricity has come into a fore. Steam engines gave way to fuel engines and IC combustion engines, which are giving way now to electric combustion. So, see, it's not that this is the first time we are seeing change, but the sheer velocity of change that we are seeing right now is generally not seen before. I'll give you stats. If you look at advancements that we have seen in the world of speech recognition or handwriting recognition, it's taken us about a decade to get where we are. A lot of the autonomous cars that we see today out road, there's at least a decade of research which has gone in there. But when it comes to language understanding, we have delivered a lot in just 2 years. Now this is also happening because there is a lot of money that's being poured into this field, right? So if you look at, if you just look at that, the sheer amount of money that's coming in, literally in 21 to 23, you've got about $30 billion worth of investments into just AI models that have happened. So all this means that the average office worker is going to be impacted, which involves a lot of people here in this room. And what's going to happen is some people, because different human beings, they react differently, some people are going to absorb that change very quickly, they're going to embrace that change quickly, and some people will not, right? And that is going to create this concept of a little bit of us versus them if organization leaders, which many of us in this room are not careful about and don't think about it consciously. And that, I think, are some of the questions that a lot of us are going to ponder about long after this conference is over, right? So with that, I'm going to use the opportunity to call Madhu on stage. Madhu's, as she would have just introduced, he's the chief customer and technology officer for Google, and I'm going to welcome him on stage. Come on in, Madhu.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, thanks, Madhu. Thanks for coming in.
Sure.
Well, I'm going to start with the first question to you, Madhu. I mean, one of the things is the whole concept of AI, one would agree, is rather polarizing, right? I mean, even today, Madhu and I, we were having a discussion pre-lunch, and we realized that we have a lot of different perspectives on how this plays out. Very quickly, what's your view on this world?
I think AI has been around for over 2 decades. At least in Google, we've been practicing this well beyond 2 decades now, and we've been progressively improving. What's happened in the last 2.5 years is the amount and momentum and velocity in which it has propelled forward makes it very exciting, makes it interesting. We are optimists. Fundamentally, we believe AI is a tool, it's a set of technologies. What that enables us to do is to take advantage of that to improve the foundations of what we all can be and how it can be, right? So as a result of that, and at the same time, like any technology, we have to be responsible about it. We have to be very careful about how we bring it to market and how do we bring it to consumers and users, etc. at the same time. And I'm going to talk about what our AI research team has been doing right from the very early days. Has been setting out a set of principles, right? Which is something we'll talk about later. But setting out a set of principles that we call AI principles that says how, when we develop AI, how are we going to be responsible about what we develop, and how we are going to expect it to work with us. And the underlying, I mean, one of the things that I really like about it is like AI will be socially good. AI will be, will listen to human beings, and it will actually work for us, right? These are the things that we have set out, and we will continue to develop and evolve this technology in that format. But I mean, as I said, great optimist. We believe this is a great piece of technology that's going to help all of us move forward.
Fantastic. Thank you, Madhu.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to use the mobile phone because I had some questions jotted out for you and I left the paper out there, right? So, I mean, one of the things that you've been talking about here is around culture, right? How do you see from an application as a business when you confront these technologies, etc. Because I sit on the vendor side, and when I look at technologies and I say, hey, what, these are great things we're going to do, but um, how does it impact it inside your organization when you face this dramatic new thing in front of you? How do you absorb it, and how do you take this technology forward? I don't know. What is the
Yeah.
cultural impact? What is the social impact? And now, when you talk to your team and members, what do you
How
see?
does it? So I think the jury is out on exactly how it's going to play out, Madhu. It's a good question. I like what you said. I mean, it's not that AI has not been around. AI has been around for a while, and a lot of us will eventually first consume AI in our personal lives before we consume it in our corporate lives, right? I mean, our ability to consume, like I was saying, for many of us, for now, AI is actually search on steroids, right? And that's how it starts. And then eventually we evolve out of it. But I do think that in the initial phases, AI is in the corporate organizations probably going to be a lot more about augmentation as compared to substitution. Substitution will happen, be rest assured it's coming, but not in the immediate future. It'll probably take a while before it gets there. I think the immediate impact in terms of the economic value of AI will probably happen a lot more in the augmentation phase before it gets there. Which means we as leaders need to be one aware, which, like I was saying, it's going to create anxiety. So we need to think through what that impact from a cultural perspective is. It's definitely going to be positive in one way, in the sense that a lot of mundane stuff that we spend time doing today
Absolutely.
is probably going to be freed up, which gives us the opportunity to reskill. Gives us the opportunity to reskill, does not make us reskill, which boils down to the average individual who's facing that
Pradeep, I'm going to
paradigm.
comment here, right? I'm going to say, remember, the definition of mundane gets very interesting depending on who you ask in the organization
Yeah,
as
I
well.
agree. I agree. Not denying that. I'm not denying that
Right?
at all. And
There
also
are
the whole,
some of us who don't want meetings and some of us who love meetings.
yeah, absolutely. And again, some of the points that I was also talking about earlier, I do think that, and we had this discussion earlier too. The whole concept of what is intellect and what is considered
Yes,
to be a high-end skill will change, right? We were
absolutely.
speaking about the fact that if you look at an average human being in the 1800s in India, and an average human being who's in 2024 in India, definitely 200 years back, they would not have envisaged both of us sitting here in a room talking on wireless technology to a lot of people who can hear us, right? And that does seem like science fiction to a lot of them. And I do think that, but human beings are still around. We have grown stronger as an economy. There are a lot more people today who are gainfully employed than they were back then, right? So
Absolutely.
I think change is also positive. And like, we have weathered many storms. We probably will. It's not. I wouldn't even call it a storm. I'm probably going out on a limb there. It's probably more about the sheer opportunity that's available, and then leverage that. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's going to elevate a lot of us
Exactly.
in a very different, uh, as you said, it's probably not going to be easy for us to imagine immediately what the consequence is going to look like. It would be it would look like magic, right? The same way somebody in 1880
Yeah.
would have looked at today and like, this is magic, right? That's sort of how it would look. Absolutely, you're right.
But I was going to ask you this. There's Gen AI, and there's a lot of new tech out there, and you're in Google. You're probably at the cutting edge of a lot of these things. Have you ever envisaged that your leader tomorrow could be a sentient humanoid robot? And how would Madhu, as a professional, react to that?
Okay. Uh, it's, let me put it like, I'm going to change the term sentient to like, code,
Huh?
which is effectively what that is, right? It's effectively math and code. It's math and code, right? At the end of the day, if when you look at a manager, and so Google used to do this research called rework, and this was published for a long period of time. And then if you look at any of the underlying characteristics and traits an individual has as a manager, individual has as a leader, effectively, if you look at it, there is a tremendous body of what I would call human traits that makes up that manager leader. And when I think of managers, these are the things that I think of, right? The ability to set a vision, right? The ability to, share success, the ability to take blame for a failure, right? Many of these things foundationally are what the human beings, and that's what distinguishes great managers, great leaders, and so on. When you look at those traits, and when I look at math and code, I don't see it that way. I cannot imagine some piece of math code saying that I will take the blame for failure,
Who knows?
right? I cannot see math and code saying, okay, we're going to share this success as a team, right? I don't see that today. I don't see that for a foreseeable period of time, definitely at this point. But if you look at it from where we are, so that is what is going to. So coming back to the argument that you made, the statement that you made a little bit earlier is that what's going to happen, or the way I see it is, managers and leaders are going to now bias a lot more on the human traits, right? I mean, a lot of the first line managers, second line managers are like, oh man, the amount of grunt work we have to do every year or every day, that's going to reduce because AI as a technology is going to help you augment and, you know, change the velocity in which you're going to do your day-to-day grunt work, right? And now attend meetings, take meeting notes, summarize a meeting for you, summarize your email and things like that. But what's going to happen is you're going to get to the next phase and say, how do I take that additional time and then invest it in my employees, invest in my team, invest in my customers, invest in my partners, and that is what we are going to increase that focus on.
Got it.
Right? And that to me is the human side of what that is. So summarize your question, like, I don't see sentience being managers and leaders, but I definitely do see the situation where they're going to augment a manager probably a lot more than just individuals. Because, I mean, today, right now, I don't know how many of you use Gmail or Google Workspace, etc. I mean, you know, a shameless plug-in there, but if you're using Google Workspace, you know, you have that ability where it'll comprehend, like, you know, if you're gone on vacation, I love this feature. You go on vacation, you come back, there's a thread of about 50 emails. Now, some people will call it using email badly, but you know, there's 50 people who have written emails back and forth, and you're like this whole 50 email block, and you're like, what went on in this conversation? And it'll actually summarize that to you in 2 paragraphs. What went on, right? There's a lot more it can. You may want to dive into and read, but
Got it.
that's what technology does. It helps you prioritize where you should focus.
Makes you
on how
faster, makes you more efficient.
Makes you more efficient. You know, don't have to sift through stuff and stuff like that, right? That's how I see it today.
No, fantastic.
Right. So I had following that, right? So the question I had for you was, how do you sort of coming into this? Now you've got the leadership, you got this. Now, how do you think about the complexity of what you have to deal with on a day-to-day basis? Like now you've started communicating to people. How do you deal with the complexity of absorbing this technology? What do you face on a day-to-day basis there?
So again, that's something that we have a perspective. We haven't thought through exactly how the whole thing is going to play out. But if you ask us, there are broadly going to be a lead. I think employees have to change, but leaders have to change equally, if not more, right? A lot of us who have leaders started our careers between a couple of decades back or thereabouts, are averaging around that, right? I think, and we were used to workforces which were in the office. We ourselves started our careers like that, and to a workforce today which is very different. A lot of people work from home, and there is a lot of play around that. But that itself is a change. But when you have AI, you're going to have to change your whole style, because one, in the short period of the next 6 to 7 years, there is going to be a lot of anxiety that people are going to face, right? How is my job going to be impacted? Madhu, how am I going to be doing what I'm doing? If I am going to be very productive, if I'm going to use a lot of tech, then tomorrow will my job be taken away? Which means, especially middle management will have to spend a lot of time going back to the fundamentals of human connect and the traits that you spoke about earlier, which is to just keep that connect going. Today you can probably still get away with it, because one, even if, what I mean by getting away with it is sometimes even if you don't do some of those connects, tomorrow the kind of workforce you're going to lead and manage, they're going to be very scarce to find, right? I mean, ideally great talent or not, it's going to be that easy, especially in this space, ones who really have adapted. I think you really need to make that connect. It's not going to be very easy for the senior management layers in the organization either. So one fundamental change that they will have to make is they will have to double down on what the purpose of the organization is, taking into account, because they will have a certain mix of their workforce which will be automated. It will be AI and AI bots, and what we would call typically as a non-carbon based non-bipedal office workers, right? I mean, they will have to deal with that, and that's a change that they will have to think through. They will have to spend a lot of time focusing on business outcomes. Business outcomes are important today, but talking that language even more to ensure that how it gets done is more important is not as important, and why, and the specifics around what exactly we are affecting. I think that's going to be another change. Okay, I don't want to say it that prioritization. Some of those things are hygiene, right? Ensure that you have the right prioritization engines in place. Ensure that you have the right infrastructure. Those things I think leaders will anyways have to get to.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I was having this conversation we were talking about is, will this give us the opportunity to spend more time with customers and partners?
Yeah. Free up time to go do that, right?
Right, do that, right? Because a lot of us aspire, want to, and then you find yourself in that context of like, hey, I can spend only 10% of my time,
exactly.
or 5% of my time towards this, or in some cases none at all.
Yeah.
Right, and then here you have this opportunity to say, hey, let me actually
Do that.
step out and do that. Right, that's
So
another.
with that, I was just hearing you talk about the earlier point, saying that managers will have to change. So that's one aspect of the challenges that managers change. But in general, what are the other challenges, Madhu, that you feel organizations, or let's say you as a leader, 10 years from now, that you would see differently?
Okay, let me step back today. Like, so today, for example, when we look at this broad spectrum of technologies, specifically built around AI that's coming in, two things are happening. If you do status quo today, right, what I see is enterprises in a broad swath of capabilities continue to still are trying to build on their data stack, strictly speaking, right? They're still trying to get their handle around data lineage, like where did data come from? Is it trustable? Is it worthy? Is it something that I can build on, etc.? Because now AI sits on top of the data. If your data is not trustable, if your data is not effectively, you can't understand your data and things like that correctly, the first challenge you're going to face is that are the results of the inference of the AI even trustable? That's the foundational challenge.
Because we wrote that code.
We wrote that code and we did all of that. Previously, so far, the productivity of a technology worker was at a certain pace and velocity. That means the rate of change that we could bring in building these projects and programs was a quantum of time. Now, what Gen AI does and AI has been able to do is to improve the productivity of the technology worker, apart from improving the productivity of the classical office worker, right? The business user. Which means you can start looking at accelerating the pace of your data transformation journeys, improve the pace of your data projects and things like that, then leapfrog into saying, okay, now how am I going to use also these additional capabilities to apply it and start bringing it to my business. Now that's a journey that's going to take 5, 6,
7 years,
8 years, 7 years. That just journey, right? There's a lot when you look at the overall complexity. I mean, I said, see, if I look at where I sit in Google, we've been doing this for 20 years, right? And we still have a lot of work to do, right? And I'm sure large organizations will have their own sets of challenges at their pace that they'll have to work through. So this is not technology that's going to instantaneously flip its fingers on the enterprise side, though on the consumer side it will. So that's actually some of the interesting things, is that what's going to happen is the next generation of employees you hire are going to be very AI tool aware. Right? The same thing that happened with social, the same thing that happened with mobile. I mean, enterprises are struggling around with mobile. The people they hired all had smartphones.
Yeah.
Right? The same thing happened during the internet. The offices in India, we were still trying to figure out what is the broadband speed we need or the internet speed we need. And people walked in with 10 Mbps connectivity from their home. Right? And we didn't have 10 Mbps leaving the office.
Yep.
Right? The same challenge. The employees you hire next are going to be very AI ready, enabled, knowledgeable. And we need to start bringing that into the enterprise. So that's going to be the first set. So what's going to happen is you're going to have the next generation of employees coming into your office having all this tooling mentally, psychologically ready for. And then the existing workplace, we have not trained and got them, right? So that transformational shift, and when you do that AI transformation, it's the most classical people, process, technology, governance, all of those layers that we have to attack and work with.
Got it. It's very interesting.
It's still the same thing. It's the same old school. How does it impact my people? What changes do I have? Who is the kind of person we need to hire? Right? Okay, what of my processes I'm going to automate? How much am I going to automate? Where am I going to automate it? Right? And remember, this is not a question of when. This is not a question of if. This is a question of where. That is all it is today. It's like, okay, where do I start and how quickly do I start? Because that's your competitive advantage. This is technology that affects your competitive advantage.
Got it.
Right? So that's going to be there. And then you're going to go ahead, start putting governance around it. Like you're going to start thinking about how do I manage this thing, right? Where do I park my AI bots? Is this an IT function? Is this a science function? Is this a HR function? I mean, they do have skills. They do have to be, you got to have many of the classical HR processes applied to them. You have to retrain the bots, because they do go through drift. You will have to do succession planning kind of equivalent. You got to know which bot to throw out and which bot to bring in. So you got to keep all of these things going on inside your bots. Like in a lot of those practices come inside technology and IT and science. And you're going to do all of that. Then comes the impact, right? Because once the discipline has come in, once you've built that, then comes the impact of what changes in my organization, how do I take advantage of this in my business in a competitive fashion? Because one, I can run faster. The second question is, what additional adjacencies, and digital has always been about adjacencies, right? What additional adjacencies that I can bring to market so that I can bring value or take the wallet share from my customer, work with my customer, work with my partners, and doing that. All of that is going to become interesting as we go forward. So the cultural aspects will be a reflection of these dynamics we bring into the organization, because culture doesn't just happen, right? It happens because we do these changes. And we say, hey, we're going to get more innovative, culture changes. We're going to go after certain digital business adjacencies, culture changes. We're going to go look at different kind of people that we want to hire into the business, culture changes. Right? And that's sort of how I see, if the question is, will culture change? Absolutely. Right? And it is within us. I think we have to make sure it is positive in the right direction we want it to go. And this is where I constantly, one of the things I really liked at Google was that we established a set of AI principles. I mean, it's very easy for you to just go search for Google AI principles, search for it, you will get it. These are the principles Google operates in. We have published it outside. It is very important, I think organizations should, create a set of principles for yourself.
Got it.
Right? That says, hey, this is how we want AI to operate in our business. And then start the path, start running. Because that's the one that's going to define when you come to these really complex meetings and decision points, because all multiple paths will look right. Which path do I take? And those tenets that you absorbed as principles are going to define the direction in which you want to run. And that establishes your culture.
Thank you. That's great.
Sure. So, I mean, you come from a bank, right? So we don't. We are a technology company. So when you come from a bank, something interesting happens. There is regulation, there is regulatory affairs. There's
the fun parts of a bank.
Yeah, the fun parts of a bank, correct. And there is, and you also have, I mean, to me, a bank is really the epitome of trust, right? Like no other organization, right? People trust you with money. I don't think there is any other business in the world where people do that confidently. Right? Like, hey, take my money. That kind of business, right? So,
how is AI playing out?
How does AI play out for you? I mean, you get, not only it's changes inside, but you have your regulator coming up on you, and it's not, at your bank, it's probably 25 different countries with 25 different regulators coming and saying,
60 countries.
Hello.
Yeah, completely. I think if you look at, you're right. I mean, again, not only as a large bank, but in general, the banking and finance industry is, as you rightly said, very regulated. So it's not about the sheer fact that we can do a lot with AI. We've got to do it in a very deliberate, thought-out manner, because you're dealing with a lot of money and a lot of other people's money, right? And trust is at the core of everything. And if we get that wrong, and there's a lot of regulation too coming up, especially in the EU regions around it. But again, if you look at, and again, just putting my turn to make a plug for my bank is, I were to look at fraud detection or increasingly patterns of where you would have a lot of, like fraud detection is basically a big area where there's a lot of people trying to get banks or try to make money off banks in the not so right manner, right? So that's an area which will definitely see a lot of AI, which I would extend that to real-time transaction monitoring, because there's a lot of real-time transaction monitoring that requires us to have, to watch out, keep ensure that our cyber systems are in place, that they're up to snuff and so on. The other area which is a lot of, is from a customer experience perspective, is ensuring that we automate credit approvals, that we automate loan processing, ensure that we use the information that we have and which the customer allows us to use, of course, consent is key, to go ahead and provide him or her with personalized services, use analytics to go give them, just because you know the customer, you have their life cycle journey with us, what have they consented to share, and then go that and deliver, personalized investment options. So there's a lot of products that are increasingly going to see there. And then there is also this whole concept that you brought about in terms of the enterprise side of it, right? Which is the banks having to deal with regulations, so having automated risk management procedures in place, which says that every time you operate in a certain market, when you're transferring data, our own internal processes that allow us to deal with what's kosher and what's not, ensuring that we have automated regulatory compliance procedures in place so that we know where we can land, what we can do. Those are all the areas that I think we're big about and that we would like to. Now I know that we're on the dot and we're just out of time. So we can probably take one question from the audience before I move on. Okay.
Oh,
we just have to hold. We'll have time probably just for one. So.
This is am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. This is Srinivas. My question is around employee experience. So, given the AI playing everywhere across industry, its role, so employees also may have expectations with this cultural change across corporate systems, or the way you do performance management, or the way you do their career planning, or the way you do provide their other resources. So, how you see the employee expectations going to change? Any point of view on that?
If I were to take a quick 10-second answer, definitely yes. I mean, one would experience, it's already there, right? I think a lot of the internal systems that corporates have, they do tend to use some amount of skilling-based solutions or skilling-based employee experience things that are happening. They're also trying to use areas around new learning opportunities that they're providing. So there's got to be a whole lot there. But very quickly, your take, Madhu?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, again, very critical. Remember, this is a transformation. That means you will see change across people, process, and then comes the technology, right? So the people change is going to be, you will have to make extremely, this is new for everybody. This is not something that's been done. It's not something you can read off a book or anything like that. So this is new. What's going to happen is you have to make very deliberate, conscious choices on how you're driving performance management, what skills inside the organization you want to amplify, what behaviors you want to amplify, what behaviors are going to get augmented because of AI, and therefore you want other behaviors to get amplified. You're going to make these choices in HR. This is not just a technology question. This is a human capital question, and therefore those amplifications that you want to do, that drives your culture.
Yeah.
Right? That's sort of deliberate choices. So that's where the principles become important. You have to make those principles almost written down like policy, like even worse than policy. They just, this is what we will be, right, as principles. And then you go from there and apply them. Like, hey, I'm measuring two people, which do I like? The principles say this is what we should like, right? And then you deliberately apply it. Otherwise, you will have dilution of culture, you will have dilution of skills. You will lose the wrong people.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. It was a great session. Thanks for having us.
For more content on tech and leadership, subscribe to NASSCOM YouTube channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.